Justin had been dating Angie Verheuel for about a year, and it had been a fast love. They were mad about each other, living together in Michael's home in Grimes come May 2014. The wedding was planned near a beach in North Carolina where Justin's parents owned a big ol' home. The wedding was for 2 months later, July 2014.
There are crimes committed in a moment of rage. And then there are crimes built slowly, in silence. The kind where someone watches from a distance, studies routines, memorizes schedules, imagines a future that never belonged to them, a future they become willing to kill for. In the early hours of a spring morning in Iowa, a young man slept peacefully beside the woman he loved. Their wedding was only weeks away. Their future had already begun. But somewhere in the darkness, another man had been preparing for months. And before the sun rose, that future would be erased forever. Before we reopen this shocking cold case, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to Cold Case Reopened, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Every subscription helps us continue bringing you the stories that refuse to be forgotten. It was just after 4 o'clock in the morning on the 8th of May, 2014. An off-duty police officer was driving along Highway 141 in Iowa. The roads were quiet. Dawn had barely started to break across the horizon. Then he saw something unusual. A red sedan sat deep in a roadside ditch. The driver's door hung open. The airbags had deployed. As the officer slowed down to help, a man suddenly emerged from the darkness. He looked nervous, agitated. His breathing was heavy, his movements frantic. He claimed he had crashed his car and simply needed assistance getting home. At first glance, the story appeared believable. Another deputy arrived. The man answered questions calmly. No weapon. No visible injuries. No reason to hold him. A taxi was called. He was allowed to leave. But what the officers did not know was that only minutes earlier, just a few miles away, a young man had been murdered while sleeping in his own bed. And the stranger standing beside that wrecked car was about to become the center of one of Iowa's most chilling murder investigations. The victim was Justin Michael. He was 30 years old. Friends described him as kind, generous, and endlessly positive. He loved sports. He loved the outdoors. And he spent his free time helping others, volunteering to build homes for families in need. Justin was the type of person people naturally gravitated toward. He was dependable. Loyal. The kind of older brother who once risked his own life to save his younger sister from a dangerous current. And most importantly, he was in love. Justin was engaged to Angie Verheuel. Their relationship had moved quickly. When they met, there was an instant connection. Within months they were engaged. Their wedding was planned for the summer. Family members were excited. Friends couldn't wait. Everything seemed to be falling perfectly into place. But hidden beneath that happiness was someone who couldn't let go of the past. Someone watching. Someone growing dangerously obsessed. On the evening of the 7th of May, Justin went to bed believing tomorrow would be just another ordinary day. His mother, Marie, was staying in the guest room. Mother's Day weekend was approaching, and the family had plans together. The house was quiet. Nothing seemed out of place. Then sometime around 3:30 in the morning, Marie woke up. She sensed movement. The guest room door had slowly opened. At first she thought it was Justin. Or Angie. Perhaps one of them checking on her. But something felt wrong. The figure standing in the doorway didn't move. It simply stared. The room was dark. She couldn't make out a face. Only a silhouette. And then, a tiny red light appeared. A laser. Pointed directly at her. Frozen in fear, Marie watched as the stranger slowly closed the door and disappeared down the hallway. Moments later, gunshots shattered the silence. Angie awoke instantly. She turned toward Justin. And saw blood. A dark figure rushed out of the room. Justin had been shot multiple times in the head. He never had a chance. The frantic call to emergency services followed. The panic. The disbelief. The realization that the man she planned to marry was gone forever. Police arrived within minutes. The home was sealed. Investigators immediately faced a disturbing mystery. Nothing had been stolen. There was no sign of forced entry. Justin had been singled out. Whoever entered that house came for one reason only: to kill him. But who hated him enough to do something so brutal? Justin had no criminal history. No enemies. No involvement with drugs. No financial disputes. By all accounts, he was simply a good man. Which left detectives asking another question. Was Justin the target because of someone else? Attention quickly turned to Angie. Investigators examined her past relationships. One former boyfriend had struggled to accept the breakup. There had been incidents before. Damaged property. Acts of vandalism. Signs that someone was unable to move on. But was jealousy enough to explain murder? Or was there another man lurking in the background? As detectives dug deeper into Angie's past, another name surfaced. A man who had reacted badly when their relationship ended. Someone who allegedly sent disturbing messages. Someone who refused to accept rejection. At the time, detectives didn't know how important that name would become. But while they searched for motives, another team of investigators began examining the abandoned car found beside the highway. And what they discovered there would change the entire investigation. Because hidden among the debris were items that didn't belong. Evidence that appeared planted. Evidence pointing toward another man. A clue so suspicious. It almost seemed designed to mislead. And perhaps that was exactly the point. If you are still watching at this point, drop a comment with "I'm still here." Let's see who is truly following this shocking story, because what investigators uncover next reveals months of planning, deception, and a murder plot more disturbing than anyone imagined. The evidence recovered near the crashed vehicle immediately raised questions. Why would a man be driving alone before dawn, miles away from home, only to end up in a ditch less than an hour after a brutal murder? And why did some of the items found near the crash seem strangely out of place? Investigators searched the roadside carefully. Among the discarded items were ammunition magazines compatible with the type of weapon believed to have been used in the shooting. There was camouflage clothing. Protective earmuffs. And then there was something even stranger. A receipt. Not in the name of the driver, but in the name of another man. At first glance, it looked like a major breakthrough. Detectives wondered if they had uncovered a second suspect. Perhaps even an accomplice. But experienced investigators know that sometimes evidence is not left behind by accident. Sometimes it's planted. The driver of that crashed car was identified as David Moffat. He was 26 years old. Quiet. Reserved. A man with no violent criminal record. But there was one connection that immediately caught investigators' attention. David knew Angie. Not only did he know her, he had dated her. Their relationship had ended long before Angie became engaged to Justin. But according to people close to the situation, David had never truly moved on. He struggled to accept that Angie had chosen someone else. And that someone else was Justin Michael. As detectives dug deeper into David's life, a troubling picture began to emerge. This wasn't a man who had simply experienced heartbreak. This was a man who appeared to be consumed by obsession. The investigation revealed that David and Justin worked for the same company. Imagine that reality. Every day, David walked into work and saw the man Angie had chosen over him. Every conversation. Every celebration. Every reminder that Justin was building a future David desperately wanted. And when Justin announced his engagement, something inside David appeared to change. Witnesses later described his reaction as emotional and intense. Instead of moving on, investigators believe he began planning. And planning carefully. A search of David's home uncovered handwritten notes. The notes weren't random thoughts. They were observations. Times. Locations. Lights turning on and off. Possible routes into a residential neighborhood. Descriptions of houses. Investigators believe these notes documented surveillance. Someone had been watching. Studying. Waiting. But perhaps the most disturbing discovery was what appeared to be an elaborate effort to frame another person. Police uncovered evidence suggesting someone had created false identification documents. Someone had purchased a firearm using another man's identity. Someone had intentionally left behind clues pointing investigators in the wrong direction. It was an extraordinary level of preparation. This wasn't a spontaneous act. According to prosecutors, it was a carefully designed plan. One intended not only to kill, but to shift the blame onto an innocent person. The more detectives uncovered, the more complicated the case became. They traced purchases, examined electronic devices, reviewed internet activity, and what they found painted a chilling picture of premeditation. Searches related to police procedures. Questions about criminal investigations. How quickly officers respond to emergencies. What evidence homicide detectives examine. Even searches asking whether someone could get away with murder. Each search alone might have meant little. Together, they told a story. A story of obsession slowly turning into violence. A story of someone trying desperately to outsmart the system. But crimes built on deception often unravel in unexpected ways. And ironically, the mistake that may have destroyed the entire plan wasn't made inside the victim's home. It happened on the road. After the murder. Investigators believe David fled the scene in a hurry. Driving through the darkness. Trying to escape. Trying to stay ahead of whatever came next. But in the panic, he missed his turn. Lost control. And crashed his car into a ditch. Months of planning. Countless efforts to hide his tracks. And suddenly, everything began falling apart. Because accidents create evidence. Evidence creates questions. And questions lead investigators where criminals never expect them to go. By the time detectives finished piecing together the timeline, the case against David was growing stronger. Still, there was one major problem. The murder weapon had never been found. No gun. No direct forensic evidence linking him to the shooting itself. Which meant prosecutors would need to rely heavily on circumstantial evidence. But sometimes circumstantial evidence becomes overwhelming. The surveillance notes. The false identities. The suspicious purchases. The attempts to mislead investigators. The obsession. The motive. The timeline. Each piece connected to the next. Like fragments of a puzzle slowly revealing an unmistakable image. And as prosecutors prepared for trial, David prepared for his defense. Because he wasn't going to admit responsibility. Not yet. Instead, he would claim something entirely different. Something he hoped would spare him from spending the rest of his life behind bars. But before we continue, if you're enjoying this investigation, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Cold Case Reopened. And tell me in the comments. Do you believe David planned every detail from the beginning? Or do you think his obsession simply spiraled out of control? Because in the next part, the courtroom battle begins. And the truth behind one of Iowa's most shocking murders will finally be revealed.